Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Oh, this week we're going to continue our stop-motion animation festival with 2009 Charlie Kaufman and Duke Johnson film, Anomalisa.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Palter.
And if you like what you see / please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media. And, you know, if you like this show, we got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, go check us out. Look on everywhere you get a podcast. YouTube is a big thing for us, so please go there.
We're on Instagram.
Subscribe, do all the things.
Yes.
Watch all the shows. We got a bunch of playlists on there. Everything collected in a really nice package for everyone to follow along with. Okay.
Yes.
Anomalisa.
Yes.
I will start this review by saying I have no clue what you think of this movie.
Okay.
I have some idea, some hopeful thoughts of. This is going to be a very interesting conversation because this is a very fascinating movie. I know you're not a big Schenectady fan.
I was not.
And that's Charlie Kaufman. And of course, like at the beginning, this was co-directed by Duke Johnson, who I think did a lot of the actual stop-motion stuff here.
Yes.
But this is such a very Kaufman film in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But, you know, obviously the writer being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine. And
I love his vision. I will say that. I like Synecdoche. Moments of it I loved.
Yes.
The movie as a whole was trying for me, but everything else, everything he's been the screenwriter for, I'm a massive fan.
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind adaptation.
Yes.
But then he went on to do, you know, Schenectady. He directed that one as well. And then I'm thinking of Ending Things, which we've done.
Yes.
And then this one as well. So, you know, he's dabbled in directing. Amazing writer. Whatever you think of him, you can't say he's not original. You can't say he does not push the boundaries of film.
He is so surreal.
And
he is so surreal in his vision.
As a film fan and a movie lover and someone who takes the art form very seriously, I want all my directors to do that. Maybe not all of them.
So there's in the review. I read the review for this movie, the Roger Ebert. I can't remember who it was, but
yeah.
RogerEbert.com.
Sure. Yeah.
The reviewer said the very first sentence just says, "There's everything that's happening in major motion picture world, and then there's whatever Charlie Kaufman's doing."
And
it's completely true.
If you ask me, give the man whatever money.
Just let him do his thing.
Keep doing this, but you know, this film essentially has, I mean, this is a very adult film, and we talked about last time when we did Coraline how stop motion is mainly based around children's films for the most part.
Yeah, totally.
So this one not only just looks different in a lot of ways, but it also just gets much. I mean, you're showing animated dolls having sex here.
I was going to say the best.
It's not Team America.
It's the best puppet sex scene I've seen since Team America. I have that written down.
It's way better than Team America.
But it's the best one I've seen. Actually,
you're right. Yeah, you're
right.
I
was going to say it's the only one, but that's not true because Meet the Feebles. That
was way before.
Right, but I'm just saying that's got some good puppet sex scenes in it too.
That's Peter Jackson, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But we basically have 3 actors in this movie.
3 voice actors.
David Thewlis, who's in I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yes.
And then Jennifer Jason Leigh, who's just classic.
Jennifer Jason Leigh, yeah.
She's amazing. And then, speaking of classic, Mr. Tom Noonan. Now,
God, I love Tom Noonan so much.
I love him so much as well. And we can get into the way he's utilized here because I think it's actually a very, very major part of the movie. It obviously is.
Yeah.
But the
I mean, he has more not screen time because it's obviously all audio, but he has more screen time than anybody else.
He has the hardest job.
He has the hardest job here.
For sure. And I mean, let's get into it. So, this is essentially a man just kind of bored of his life. He's flying to Cincinnati, just flyover state. Kind of like he's just mindlessly going through life.
Within this like niche marketing world, he's a rock star.
Yeah, it's
like in this
he wrote a book about customer service.
Yeah,
could not be more dry of a subject.
Yes,
and that's what you're famous for. So now you get paid probably tens of thousands of dollars to fly
and you
around.
Walk into the hotel and everybody's like, it's Michael Stone.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and you're niche famous, right? Like we are.
Exactly. He's more niche famous than we are. I don't want to know what that says about my midlife crisis, which is, I'm sure, is coming down the pipeline any day. But yeah,
no, I'm obviously joking there. But yeah, he's on it. He's going to Cincinnati, right?
Yep.
Like
try the chili.
Just the first day he's on the plane, you hear all this conversation around him. He's just like blah blah blah, just trying to zone it out. He gets this letter from his wife that's like basically "fuck you."
Well, from his ex-girlfriend.
It was his ex-girlfriend.
It was his ex-girlfriend.
So is that the girl he
that's
calls
Bella.
When he gets there?
Yes,
Okay,
that's Bella.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if that was her or his wife.
She says in it something about the date being 1995. So the movie takes place in, I want to say, 2005.
Yeah.
And so this letter he's been carrying around for a decade, but he's married to a different woman who has a child with now, and he still is obsessing over this letter.
And you can understand how I would mistake that, because every character that's not our two main characters has the exact
same face.
Exact same face. And Kaufman and Johnson here do this fascinating, weird thing, which I've never seen in animation before. But they leave the lines of where they change their face rather than animate them out.
Yep.
And so their eyes and their mouths, they swap those out for a variety of different things, but they leave the lines
because they're all
there.
3D printed, and
it makes the character seem so robotic.
Well, and they talked a lot about this. Well, first of all, let's back up just a little bit. Do you know? Have you done any research about the Theater of the New Ear?
No.
So the Theater of the New Ear, this was in 2005. The Coen brothers wrote some radio plays for this. A couple other big name directors wrote some radio plays for this. It was all original work. And Charlie Kaufman wrote Anomalisa for that. And the way that
short originally, right?
Well, the way that it worked was, you would go and see a live production. You would come into a theater, you would sit down, and up on the stage, there was live music produced by I forget his name, but the composer who does the music here. Yeah. And he did that for all the different, for the Coen brothers, all the other directors that did stuff. And then whoever the voice actors for these radio plays would be performing it up on stage, sitting at a table just like we are with microphones. And then he had the Parabolas dance theater, which I've seen them do interpretive dance for Radio Lab's live pieces before, but they were doing live interpretive. They do weird stuff using shadow play and doing stuff where you're doing silhouettes or it's backlit behind like fabric. They're just amazing. Like, they're able to take something that is otherwise just auditory and do weird stuff with it where you are sensory watching that. But part of the point of this also was to see that there are only 3 actors. It was a short, but even the short was like almost 50 minutes long.
Yeah.
And the 3 main actors were Thulis and Tom Noonan and Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yeah.
And so...
And this got funded through Kickstarter, right?
Right. And so imagine seeing the radio play version of this, and you suddenly understand why having one person do everyone's voices except for the other 2 leads was so important. And when it came time to turn it into something visual, Kaufman couldn't picture it. He was like, I don't know how you
real, like, live action.
Yeah, he's like, I don't know how you do it. And they tried. They worked with it for a little while with live action before, once they landed on stop motion, he was like, I love the uncanny valley of stop motion because that'll be so necessary here. And he definitely does. But I think that this concept of all of them having the same faces, all of them having the same voices, and then obviously a big piece that we see is added into the visual representation is that this paranoia that Stone, our main character, has of what might be happening in his life.
Yeah.
Well, just this idea of like, am I a robot? Am I human? Am I real? Suddenly comes completely into focus because the uncanny valley. And apparently the stop motion crew that was working on the film tried to dissuade them away from the art direction they were going with, where they were like, we want almost hyper realistic. We want to do these 3D modeled faces in this way. They were like, it's going to be too disturbing. And they were like, Kaufman. He's like, lean in, lean in, lean in. Like, yeah, he's like, I don't want it to be straight up terrifying, but I want it to always.
And it's not.
And he said, I want you to have moments where you forget. Well, he said two things. The first one's, we've talked about with Coraline. I want you to forget that it's stop motion until you remember, right? And then in those moments when you remember, it can be because of these weird, disjointed faces that are slightly wrong, right?
There is a light bulb moment in this movie, right? Like one of those things that pops in your head, and you're like, you realize what's going on. And I watched this with my wife, who's never seen it before. I'm like, tell me if you had noticed something different about this movie. And she went through all the things, and she's like, is it okay? So like, he just called his partner. Is he gay? And that's his son. Like, when he's in the hotel.
Takes you a minute, yeah.
And so you're like, oh wait, the guy on the plane, the cab driver, everyone walking him up to his room.
Every voice coming in over the intercom.
The little kids in the background. And when he gets off room service and then hangs up and then picks it up again and calls his wife and it's the same voice, you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And that's where you're just like, oh, that's the light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my God, that is fucking genius.
Yep.
Like, how can you wrap your head around that concept? And it's very easy if you're in the world that he's in, where he's just bored out, he's this gray piece of paper walking through life, right? Yep. And everyone sounds and looks the same to him, right? And they lean in so hard to that it's so effective to the point where you're just like, wait, they're really doing this?
Yeah.
And like, you really pulled this off?
Yep.
So, did you like this movie? Did you love this movie? Like, have you seen this before?
No.
You haven't. This is your first time.
So,
what were your impressions?
So, Michael Stone checks it. I was going to say really quick, the second thing that Kaufman said about doing this as stop motion is that he said, I want you to really notice the loneliness of what it's like to travel and stay in hotels by yourself.
Sure.
And he said, and I want there to be unease there. And he said, if it was live action, you wouldn't notice any of that. You would just consider it the background and wait for the next thing to happen. He's like, because it's stop motion, and this is the only film in this festival where this is that meta style deliberate, is because it's stop motion, because you know that they're miniatures.
And someone built that.
You'll pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
And you do. And when he's first checking into the hotel, there is a total Charlie Kaufman-esque thing where the bellhop is saying everything a second too late. Like, he's like, this is the room, but he says it after they've already walked in. He says after you, but it's after Stone has already walked in. It's just wrong. Everything about it's just barely wrong in the way that only Charlie Kaufman can do.
I mean, I'm thinking of ending things.
Exactly. You're just like, oh, this is, and you don't know why it's weird yet.
Yeah.
And it takes a while, then you're like,
figure it out.
That's why it's weird.
And that's why he's important, because he does something to an audience that not a lot of directors can pull off.
So,
go ahead.
Michael Stone checks into the Frigoli Hotel.
Yeah.
The Frigoli delusion is an affliction that happens to people who are suffering usually from a frontal lobe injury, so some kind of a traumatic brain injury. The Frigoli delusion is that everyone in your life has been replaced by a single person who is acting out all the parts. And all I can think is that however long ago, obviously pre-2005, 4, 3, maybe since he was a teenager, who knows, Kaufman was like, oh yeah, I've felt like that before, and then attached that concept to what it's like to fall in and out of love, or to fall in and out of depression.
Yeah.
And used it to this degree that is like, that's so perfectly a Charlie Kaufman thing. Normally, his movies are, I don't want to say science fiction is the wrong term, and I don't know what it is, but it's this surrealist, like, fictionalizing concepts to get across complex human emotions that we're going through. right? So I mean, sometimes it's science fiction. If you think about like Eternal Sunshine is totally science fiction, but like I'm thinking of Ending Things isn't really. It's this metaphysical fiction that's inside this guy's head, right?
This wouldn't work as a live action movie.
You couldn't do it.
One, you couldn't do the Tom Noonan thing. If you did, it wouldn't quite be the same.
You would be stuck inside of the nightmare being John Malkovich, where everything's Malkovich.
Yeah.
It's basically that.
That's true.
It's a movie
oh my God,
of
that's
that.
So right.
Right?
I didn't even put that together. You're totally right. But you also wouldn't. It would just be a movie about this. This old horny man who takes advantage of this girl.
One night
in Cincinnati.
It doesn't have the resonance,
the depth, or the.
And so not to bury the lead here, but I love this thing. I love this thing, but in part it's because, again, in this very Charlie Kaufman-esque way,
it's so unique.
But not to his world. To his world, this is well-worn territory, because how different is this really from the Malkovich stuff, or even the puppetry in being John Malkovich, right?
Point.
Where it's like someone is pulling the strings. Someone is in charge of all of this, right?
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Or Synecdoche, where he has to rebuild his entire life as the playwright, right? Like it's this, he loves this world in which, to try and understand myself, I've built everything up. And there's a funny thing that happens later on here. I'm jumping around a bit, but there's a nightmare that Stone has that that really they all are one person, that everyone is this other character that's in love with him. And he's like, you can sleep with anybody, just not with Lisa, right? And like, I love you so much, I want to have an affair with you, like, and they all have the same faces. And for me, when that turned out to be a dream, that was the most surprising part of the movie. Not everything else. Not that everyone had the same face or Tom Noonan's voice. The fact that that was a dream and not what was really happening, that it turns out he was inside some alien cocoon where they were trying to get to like a, Captain Kirk-esque, what is the human experience about?
Yeah.
That would have seemed less weird than the fact that it was a dream. I was like, oh, we're going to play it straight. And he does. He really does. He continues down this road of this being this disorder that this character has as a symbolic amalgam to explain just trying to get back that thing, man. Because I think we've all had it in our lives. We think about the fire of our youth and this feeling of that very first butterfly of love and these different things. And those... they age over time. If you're lucky, you don't lose them. But when he's talking to Bella, who obviously also used to have a different voice and a different face, and he's like,
"Did you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize your voice."
Yeah, and he's like, "Did you?" And he asks her, and this poor woman who comes over and he's talking to her and he's kind of grilling her, and she's obviously been so deeply hurt by him a decade ago, and he's going, did you change when we were together? And she's like, you changed? What the fuck are you talking? No, I didn't change. You did, dude. Like, you left me out of nowhere. And he's like, but you changed, right? And that paranoia that he has.
He does that with Lisa, too.
Exactly. We see it happen in real time.
That's the thing. Bella could have easily been Lisa from 10 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. Different voice, different face.
100 times.
Same with his wife.
Yep.
His son, too. I mean, the man is a damaged person.
Completely, and he has a ton of depression there, but we do get to see his doll penis. So there's
a couple of times, which is very, it's so funny though, because it's like when it happens, you are like, whoa, but then you're kind of like, that fits with everything else I'm watching. That fits.
I agree, and the sex scene itself, I just can't imagine this, but it took 6 months to complete that scene, and if you watch the scene, it's very realistic. It's got some beauty to it.
It's very realistic. It's very simple.
Time, could you imagine going to work for 6 months and just moving the penis a little bit and like every frame, and then shifting the butt a little closer and then back
this week's a thrust.
How do you not go to work at some point in that 6 months and be like, what am I doing?
Look, my neck hurts because this week is a thrust week, which means I have to get down a little bit lower in order to push the tiny puppet buttocks closer towards the other doll. Yeah, that you would feel like a serial killer by the end of that. You'd be like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, and I don't know if I would say it was worth it. I mean, it is beautiful to some degree, but they also make Cyndi Lauper sound beautiful in this movie too.
That is one of the coolest scenes.
It is. It's one of the most captivating parts of it, where she sings her own version of Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
And here's another Kaufman.
And that's such a, for her type of personality as a girl, that's such a song that she would love too, right? And it was originally supposed to be the song from Titanic, I think.
Oh, really?
They couldn't get it licensed.
Oh, it's so much better that it's Cyndi Lauper.
I agree. But her loving Titanic also
would
really
read,
good.
yeah. So here's another Charlie Kaufman trope. Is Kaufman loves to introduce you to characters, set up moments of their life or something they're going through, and you identify so deeply with what they're going through that you just want them to have a happy ending. And then he starts to turn that rock over so you can see all the bugs underneath it, and very quickly you go to a place of you're gonna do it again, aren't you? You're gonna fuck it all up again, aren't you? And then they do, and that happens here, where it's after they've made love and he's had his nightmare.
It's the next morning.
And when he tells her how much he loves her and that everything needs to change, even before things start to slip, which you see coming from a mile away, you are saying to the screen, don't do this, do this, you don't have to do this. And then surely enough, Tom Noonan's voice starts to creep in along with her voice, until finally her face changes just into all the other faces, right? And it's so heartbreaking for him. And you feel the heartbreak for him, and then at some point you surpass that and you only feel for her, and you're just exhausted with him because you've spent all this time with him. He's not a good person. And yeah, he may be suffering from this very debilitating mental illness.
Definitely is.
But it doesn't change the fact that he is just wrecking everyone around him. Because to your point, at the end of the day, this movie is about a schlubby, famous within this tiny niche market guy who's deeply depressed, who goes to Cincinnati and cheats on his wife, who he has a kid with. That's what the movie's about.
Yeah. But he meets Lisa, and she's an anomaly.
She's an Anomalisa.
Anomalisa.
And then he buys a sex toy for his son, an antique Japanese sex toy for his son.
Yes.
That has the same scar on its face.
I was going to say, there's a theory around that if Lisa's even real or not, because the sex doll has the exact same
star-shaped scar around its eye.
When he brings the toy home to his son, his wife says, it looks like semen's coming out of her mouth. So maybe he just fucked the doll and it's all in his head. And that Lisa may not even be there. And the only thing to contradict that...
Jesus.
The only thing to contradict that, and that's such a Kaufman thing right there, right?
It very much is. Yeah.
And the only thing to contradict that is this final scene, which... when it ends, you're like, wait, that's it?
Yeah.
You're at the end, but it's her being happy that she even had this experience
but she also writes a letter to him, which is also cyclical because he already has a letter from Bella that he's reading at the beginning. Also, I don't know if you noticed at the very beginning when we get this great introduction, these wonderful animated clouds, and we hear Tom Noonan talking. And then another Tom Noonan takes over him, and then another one, and then pretty soon it's all the people on the plane. But we don't know that yet. We're just it's a cacophony.
It's chatter.
Yeah, it's a cacophony of Tom Noonans. The other airplane that we see, where they're like, "Look, mommy, it's another airplane." That airplane goes behind a cloud and never comes out.
Huh.
It disappears. So I don't know what the significance of that in particular is.
I did notice that.
And I would say again, going back to Synecdoche, I'd love to watch it again because I think that I understand more about Charlie Kaufman now, and how, especially when he's directing a movie, how alienating he is willing to make it, which is even a step beyond
Not
whether you're
afraid to go there and expose his real emotions.
way more, I think, than Michel Gondry ever did, or that Spike Jonze ever did. Even though their movies obviously are classics that they did with him, he made so many moments in Synecdoche just deeply unlikable and uncomfortable to a degree where I was like,
too much.
But the other difference there is that, again, like I can appreciate the talking animated pig with its guts hanging out in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and I can appreciate, I dated a girl whose house was literally on fire. I can appreciate those things, but those things also sometimes
they have to fit into the context of the movie.
And sometimes they do, but sometimes they feel a little
irresponsible.
No, like high school poetry chapbook. Like, and her house was literally on fire, and I'm like, sure. Whereas like Anomalisa, I'm like, just being like, they're all going to have this one person's voice. And that in and of itself is a feat that's so absurd and continues to pay off in a myriad of different ways throughout the movie. Like, it never gets old. It always leaves you feeling a little bit disconnected and cold and sad in the most brilliant possible way.
It really is brilliant. And like, you have his, we do have to mention again, this is co-directed with Duke Johnson.
Right.
But I don't know. I just keep doing weird shit, Charlie.
I love it.
Like you have permission to do whatever the fuck you want.
Completely. Well, and again, like I said, I think that Kaufman has always loved this idea of an art form inside the movie having deep intrinsic value.
Yep.
I mean, if you think about it, that like Jim Carrey's character in Eternal Sunshine, those drawings of Clementine as like a little pirate or whatever, right? And then you think that Catherine Keener's character keeps making smaller and smaller miniatures in Synecdoche, right? And then obviously the puppetry stuff in being John Malkovich, but he loves these characters.
Someone else controlling.
Yeah, and just the symbolism of what the art form itself is, and the fact, and I don't know that we'll ever see this again. The fact that even before he has the nightmare, and in the nightmare is really when we get meta, where his face falls off, and it looks just like the shot that I put up of the armature from Coraline, right, where when you pull that off, it's just this blank spot underneath, and it has a number on it of like which one you're using. That's literally, I mean, that is not from the radio play, of course.
Yes.
So it's like when they're making this, when he saw the armature, he was like, I'm going to use the armature as symbolic representation of what's happening in my character's head, right? In that flight of fancy in the moment. But there's even a part before his nightmare, right before he hears Lisa's voice, when he sees little floppy stop motion penis. He gets out of the shower and he wipes off, and he's kind of a little tipsy. Yeah, it is the poster. And he wipes it off and he looks, and then he looks at that line where his armature is coming off, and he starts to move it. And you go, if anyone was going to give sentient knowledge of the tiny world they're in to a stop motion character, it's going to be Charlie Kaufman in this movie. And again, I know I've said it every single episode since we did it. Maybe let's take a look at Welcome to Marwen again. Because again, to give sentience to your tiny character in that moment, to be like, wait, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
What am I made out of, right? Like, it's terrifying. It's amazing, but it is like so existentially horrifying in that moment where I was like, wait, what just happened? That doesn't happen. The California raisins aren't like, Jesus Christ, we're talking raisins, right?
Yeah.
And if they did, my little 10-year-old brain would have popped out of my head and flown away forever. Because it's the scariest concept I could possibly imagine.
That's what he's good at.
I thought the end of this movie was going to turn into the Lego movie, where all of a sudden we pull way out and it's like Charlie Kaufman and Duke like sitting there with the characters going, what are we doing, dude? Like, I had no idea what was going to happen in this movie.
So great. I'm so glad you
right?
liked it.
Because you're like, all bets might be off.
I mean, with Kaufman, I think you need to go into a movie assuming that.
Yeah.
Look at anything else he's
The end of the movie might be that I turn around in my seat in the theater and he's behind me, filming me right then, going, "Did you like the movie, fucker?" And I'm like, "Am I in the movie?"
Definitely a unique voice of generational director, I think. I mean, or I don't even say director, just creator. Right, like whether it's writing or directing or whatever he's doing, even like the radio play, I'm sure was captivating in different ways.
Well,
right?
it's like it makes me think of like when the avant-garde musician John Cage did his song that was, and I can't think of like the time duration of the song, but it's literally the song is named The Duration of Time, and all he did was sit in front of the piano. He didn't play it. He just recorded the silence of him sitting in front of it. And you can hear, like, he's kind of squeaking on the chair a little bit. And it's like, it's not totally silent, but you're like, it's not a song. And he's like, yeah, it is. And you're like, oh, you took the medium and used it against itself in a way to tell a story. And that's what Kaufman's doing, right? Like, Kaufman he made up a fucking fake brother for himself in one of his movies.
That's right.
Right? To do a literal adaptation of a real book that was written by a real woman.
And it's nothing like
it's nothing like it's all fake. Like none of it's, and you go, he's using the medium against itself to a new end. And that's endlessly adventurous, right? It'll always be interesting.
Fascinating director. Last thing I'll say, Cincinnati chili sounds fucking disgusting.
I agree.
I've never had it before.
No.
It's served with pasta and chocolate.
Yeah. It has like chocolate and chili powder in it, and it's served on top of spaghetti.
Whoa. Sounds terrible.
Yeah, no, I agree. Cincinnati chili, I'm sorry. If we have fans from there, I'm sure it's great. It's probably like
tell us we're wrong.
It's a delicacy you grew up with. Feels regional.
Sounds gross, though. It may be delicious.
Terrifyingly gross. Anyway, check out Anomalisa. It's an incredible film.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for listening and watching all the way through. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see / hear.
Yes.
Follow along with all of our festivals. Stop motion. We got a couple more left. We got Fantastic Mr. Fox. We have My Life with Zucchini.
Yep.
And then we're going to do A Forgotten Gem of Mary and Max.
So
a great festival. Yeah. Tons of great films here. Lots of different types of stop motion, too.
Yes.
Which I'm really excited to keep going forward with. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.